All right, we're back. Graveyard Shift Movie Podcast, episode number 152. And this week, we were fucking late. and so this is coming out on a Saturday. If you saw the community post yesterday, work was busy. I just didn't have time to make one in time for Friday. But it's a day late. We may literally today is June 3rd, and in 2 days is the 3rd year anniversary of the podcast. And up until yesterday, we had never missed a Friday night upload. So it was bound to happen. But here we are, back again. This week to talk about Final Destination from 2000, the year 2000. In the year 2000. Conan O'Brien, anyone, please? But yeah, Final Destination. I don't know when the last time I watched the OG Final Destination was. But it's been a while, because there was stuff in it that I was like, I don't remember any of this. Specifically, like later on in the movie with Devon Sawa's character, who is like hiding out in a cabin and stuff, and I was like, I don't remember any of this. But yeah, it's been a long time since I watched this movie, and man, this movie is great. I love this movie. I'm gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10. It was really good. It was really good. It's not, Final Destination is known for its over-the-top kills and the elaborate ways that people die. This movie, everything is very simple, which you kind of appreciate, because I'm sure somewhere down the line we'll end up watching the other ones. And it's cool watching all this stuff happen. But when you watch this, it's just so simple how everyone, except for one death in particular, that's the stupidest death in the movie, which is it echoes what is to come in later Final Destination movies. But yeah, they're all really simple. One in particular, is it the first? Yeah, the first death in this movie is someone just, some water leaks out from a toilet and they slip, and like a drying rack wire hooks around their neck and they can't get traction to take the pressure around their neck. And it is brutal, like when you're watching it, and it's so simple. You don't see any gore. There's no decapitation happening or severed limbs or anything. It's just him getting strangled to death, and it's gruesome. And yeah, everything's really, the performances are really good. The very young Sean William Scott in this movie had fucking American Pie been out already? I think that was like the year after or something. But he's in it. He's mostly like comic relief. But yeah, Devon Sawa obviously is in it. Devon Sawa in the prime of his career when he was in, everything. This is his 4th appearance on the podcast, I believe, with Idle Hands, Hunter x Hunter, and season 1 of Chucky. He might have even been in another one, but those are the ones I remember. So I think this is 4 for him. Yeah. Tony Todd is in this for a scene. Just a scene. So shout out to, I think, so American Pie was 99. So American Pie had come out the year before Final Destination. Which is kind of surprising. Maybe it wasn't that much time in between releases. Because I would think that if that came out, Sean William Scott's character would have a bigger role. Maybe it was they filmed them at the same time, and American Pie is just the first one that came out. Because after American Pie, Sean William Scott was in a bunch of movies that just, these early 2000s comedy, shitty movies. That was his prime real estate back then. But anyway, yeah. Final Destination, it's so good. It's super simple. And yeah, that's about all I can say here for no spoilers. So hey, spoiler warning for Final Destination. If somehow you've gone your whole life without watching, uh, you know, Final Destination, uh, I'm gonna ruin everything about it. So you've been warned. The movie starts off with Devon Sawa playing Alex Browning, and his class. I think it's a French class, because they're going to France. They're going on a vacation to France for 10 days. At first, it starts off with Alex and his friend meeting up. His friend Todd, and Todd's brother, and I thought it was just like his group of friends was going, but no, it's the whole class is going, which is a huge class. So I'm gonna assume it's everyone who had taken French that year. But yeah, they're going on a trip to Paris. Devon Sawa, his character is superstitious. That before he leaves for the airport, the mom like wants to rip a tag off of his fucking suitcase, and he's like, "No, we made it through the last flight, so that that tag is lucky or whatever." And they're like, "Okay, but then, unbeknownst to any of them, the tag comes off by itself as they're loading the suitcase up into the car. So they get to the airport. They meet up with Alex's buddies. They get into the whole class. There's a part here that has nothing to do with the movie, but it's just this religious dude. I think he's supposed to be like a Scientologist dude, handing Alex this pamphlet about his religion. And I just want to put it because he has the most amazing look through the whole movie. He's got white face paint, or I guess it's not face paint if it's up here, but white paint on his forehead making a symbol, and he only has a single ponytail in the back. He's bald completely, but one ponytail out of the back, and he looked great. And I felt obliged to mention it here. So, as Alex is checking in for his flight, he notices that all the flights behind him on the board, they're getting canceled, delayed, canceled, delayed, delayed, canceled, and he's like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. Also, I had to put, unless this is super early in the morning, because it seems like this is nighttime. I'm pretty sure that it's nighttime. What school takes a nighttime flight? Like, they say, I think the flight's 7 hours. So they're going to get there at like 6 o'clock in the morning. Is everyone supposed to sleep on the plane and then they just go about their business when they get to France? Like, wouldn't you want to arrive at night so then you can get to the hotel and everyone can go sleep and then you wake up the next morning? Because, yeah, is France one of those places that if you leave, where does this movie take place? Wisconsin? I don't think it takes place in Wisconsin. But is it one of those places where when you go to it, it's like daytime where we're in nighttime right now? But I don't think it is. I don't know. It bothered me that they were taking a night flight. I think they should have been taking a morning flight like normal people and get there at nighttime. But anyway, that's just me. So Alex goes over and he like has a stare down with the plane through the window, and I was like, oh man, he wants to fuck this plane, Todd comes over to him and he's like, hey, we got a 7-hour flight. Let's go take a shit. You don't want those two hot chicks over there to have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the flight after you just took a shit, and they smell it, and then they attribute that smell to you always. And so Alex is like, all right. So they go, and we get a nice top-down shot of both of them just taking a shit in the stalls. As they're shitting, Rocky Mountain High by John Denver is playing, and Alex hears it, and he's like, oh, John Denver died in a plane crash. Here's number one thing I forgot about this movie. I forgot how much they play this John Denver song. Every time someone's about to die, they play the Rocky Mountain High. Maybe not every time, but I think half of the deaths in this movie, they play the Rocky Mountain High John Denver song. And it was like a call of death, if you heard it. So, eventually, they start boarding the flight. As they're boarding, Todd mentions that, they see a baby. And Todd is like, oh, it'd be a real fucked up God if, he took down this plane. And then they see a special needs person. And Todd is like, a real fucked up God. So, they get in their seats. Alex is then asked by the two hot chicks that Todd had pointed out earlier if they'll trade seats with him and sit next to Todd, because they were supposed to sit next to Todd, but they don't want to sit next to him. So Alex is like, sure, whatever, I'll switch seats. He goes and gets in the seat, and as soon as he sits down, the food tray in front of him falls down, and he goes to put it back up, but the screw has come undone from it, and he's like, oh, I don't like any of this shit, They're about to take off. Seann William Scott is munching on a bag of Whoppers, and I was extremely jealous. I love Whoppers. I don't remember the last time I ate them out of a bag, though. If anyone here knows Whoppers, they come in that carton where you gotta, like, pour it out into your hand and shit. Those are the good things. But, he's eating some Whoppers. And then immediately, the biggest tragedy of the movie, they hit some turbulence. He spills the Whoppers. And I was like, no. And then there is a great shot of, as they're going through this turbulence, the Whoppers on the ground rolling back and forth. And I laughed very much at the up-close Whopper shot. So they hit some extremely bad turbulence, to the point that oxygen masks are coming down. Even the flight attendants look worried. And then the next thing you know, a fucking electrical fire happens. Somehow, an electrical fire sparks up. And then just a complete panel of the door flies open. And it's gone. And then a whole row of seats flies out of the plane. There's one dude here who gets smacked in the head by a boombox that goes flying by, which I thought was very funny. And it's pandemonium. They're screaming. And then finally, the next thing you know, the whole plane blows up. And we get a shot of Devon Sawa, his whole face just engulfed in flames and burning to death. And then he fucking, and he wakes up and he's back on the plane. And he's to where the two sisters are asking him. I don't know why I keep saying sisters. I don't know if they are sisters. They could just be friends. But they're asking to switch seats. And he's like, oh, and he gets up and he runs to the seat that he sat at when he saw himself die. And he looks, and the screw and the tray is the same thing. It's the same thing that he just saw. So now he's like, fuck this. Everyone, this plane's about to blow up. I'm getting the fuck off of this thing. This is when we're introduced to Carter, who will be a main character throughout the movie. And for some reason, instead of Carter just letting Devon Sawa get kicked off of the plane, he decides to get up and fight Devon Sawa for Devon Sawa yelling about how the plane's gonna blow up. So then that in turn gets him kicked off as well. And then he's pissed that he's kicked off of the plane. And it's like, well, if you would have just sat there and minded your own business, you would still be on the plane. So Devon Sawa, Carter's girlfriend, two teachers, this woman named Clear, who will be a main character. Also, yes, her name is Clear Rivers. She was born Native American, and they just named her Clear Rivers. I made that spot up, but, Clear. And then Todd gets off of the plane after his brother tells him to go check on Alex. Oh, and Seann William Scott gets off. And later on, Seann William Scott is like, why did I get off the plane? And I'm like, I don't know. Why did you get off the plane? But they all get off the plane. The flight security is pissed. They're like, no one else is getting on the plane. You fuckers are staying here until the 3 o'clock plane gets here. And then you can leave on that. So Carter is pissed because he's like, we're going to lose half of a day in France because of this fucking asshole. The one teacher, what's her name? Miss Midston or something? I know I have it written down later. But she talks to the flight security and she's like, listen, these are all our students. We need to have someone there to watch out for them. And so the flight attendant's like, all right, one of you can get back on the plane, but only one. So the actual French teacher himself comes over and he's like, you can get on the plane. And she's like, no, you know French and everything. You get on the plane. I'll just take the 3:00 flight and I'll meet you there. And so he's like, okay. So he gets on the plane. So everyone's chilling out in the, what do you call it? Waiting area, I guess, of the plane. And the teacher starts asking Alex what he saw. So Alex is telling him, he's like, I had this vision, the plane blew up, it's gonna, it had all this turbulence and the side of the plane opened up and shit. And then Carter is like, you're fucking nuts, and they start fighting again and they're rolling around on the ground. Meanwhile, Sean William Scott is watching as the plane takes off. And no one else is paying attention to it. But then, all of a sudden, Sean William Scott sees the plane blow up in midair. And then the shockwave from the explosion causes all of the windows to explode. And so everyone stops fighting and they turn around and they see the plane blew up. And then they all look over at Alex and they're like, oh, fuck, this is some real shit, So then they all get pulled into this interrogation room because they were meant to be on this plane. And Alex all of a sudden told everyone, hey, this plane's going to blow up. So they're a little sketched out about Alex, right? So they bring in 2 agents to interrogate him. And no shit, the 2 agents' name are Agent Ween, okay, named after the band, and Agent Shrek. Now, I believe Shrek came out 2001. So it wasn't a movie at this point, but I've never heard of another man in my life named Shrek besides the ogre. And then there's just a random cop in this movie whose name is Shrek. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So they think that Alex had something to do with this plane blowing up. All of the people sitting around him are kind of creeped out about him. One by one, they're interrogated, and, in the interrogation room, we get our first little inklings of the teacher who survived feeling guilty because the other teacher wanted her to get on the plane, and then she made him get on the plane, so now he's fucking dead, and she's alive. They're asking Alex why he wanted to get off the plane, and he just tells them, I had this vision of the plane blowing up and shit, and they're like, very likely, so everyone gets interrogated, and then finally we get a scene where everyone's mom and dad comes to pick them up from the airport, and they're all hugging and shit, but we noticed that Clear doesn't have any parents that show up for her, and you're like, oh, what the fuck is this, she got shit parents. So Alex and his family drop her off at her house. And everyone goes home for the night. Devin Sawa stays up that night, though, at home, and he's watching news reports about the plane blow up, and he's all sad. He's fucking crying and sobbing and shit. And he's not having I guess that would freak you out if you had a vision of everyone dying and then it actually happened. You'd be like, what the fuck is going on? Before he goes to sleep that night, he sees some spooky lightning striking right outside of his house. And it's like, oh, fuck, there's an electrical storm. So then we do a time jump. And I'm not sure how long, but it's long enough for them to build a statue as a memorial outside of the school that all the kids belong to. They build like this raven. And it has all the names of the people that died on the plane under there. And then they play some really cheesy, light, acoustic rock in the background while everyone is sitting around, gathered around. So then everyone has to come up and drop a rose at the memorial. So as they're doing this, Carter and Alex wind up in line next to each other. And Carter is telling Alex, I hope you don't think I'm grateful that I wasn't on that plane. You don't control my life. I control my life. Fuck you, I'm going to do whatever I want. And Alex is like, bro, I don't know what you're talking about. And then he says, I'm never gonna die. And he walks off. And I was like, okay, bro, whatever. Sean William Scott then comes over and he goes, hey, Alex. I took my driver's test the other day at the DMV. I got a 70. It's the lowest score you can get, but I still passed. And then he says that, you know how the guy sits in the car with you as you're driving? Well, the guy told me I'm going to die young. And Alex is like, okay. And Sean William Scott's like, so, is that true? You know? And Alex was like, I'm not a fucking fortune teller, dude. I don't know what you want from me. And Sean William Scott's like, oh, really? You know? And he keeps asking him, like, more questions. And Alex is like, I'm not answering any of these. I don't know the answers. So Sean William Scott walks away. Alex tries to go up to the teacher and talk to her. But she's like, don't talk to me. You scare the shit out of me. And she walks away. And I couldn't help feeling like if I was on a plane and the dude said, hey, everyone, get off the plane. It's going to blow up. And then it blew up. I feel like I would be a little more grateful about the situation. Everyone in this movie, except for Todd and Clear, and I guess Sean William Scott. Sean William Scott just wants like him to answer more fortunes. But everyone else hates him and thinks he's like a freak and shit. So as he's here, he talks to Todd, and we learn that Todd and Alex have not been allowed to see each other since the plane blew up because his dad doesn't like Alex because Todd's brother stayed on the plane, but Alex saved Todd. So wouldn't you be grateful that you still have one son? I don't really understand, but whatever. And then Clear gives him a kiss on the cheek and thanks him for her being alive. That night, Todd is at home and he's shaving his non-existing facial hair with a razor. He just cuts himself for no reason and then doesn't clean the blood. He just leaves it there as he's still looking in the mirror. And then all of a sudden, the wind starts picking up a little bit and we go over to the toilet and we see water dripping down from a pipe. And we're like, oh shit, it's about to get Final Destination-y in here. So the water starts like creeping across the floor. Todd looks into the mirror, and for the first time in this movie, and I think that this is the only movie that this happens in, because I don't remember this as being a part of the franchise. He sees, I guess, death in the mirror. It's like this black shadow hovering around him and like moving and morphing, and he looks and nothing's there, and when he looks back, the mirror is clear. And he's like, what the fuck, you know? He's walking around in the bathroom. He has a boombox in here, and he plugs it in, and it starts playing John Denver, Rocky Mountain High, and he remembers it from the plane, and he goes, oh, fuck that, and he pulls it out, you know? Meanwhile, Alex is at home, and he's looking at Penthouse magazine when an owl lands on his window, and so he throws his magazine at. Who does that? If an owl landed on my window, you think I want to scare it away? I'd be like, oh, look at a fucking owl. You know, like you don't get to see those up close very many times. But no, he throws his magazine at it. The magazine hits his oscillating fan that he has, and it blends up a page and sends out a little piece of paper that lands right on his lap that says Todd. And so Alex is like, oh, fuck, you know? So he's like, I don't know if anything's wrong with him, but it seems weird, so I'm going to go check up on him, you know? So he leaves to go check on Todd. Meanwhile, Todd is about to get fucked because he finally slips on the water that's near his feet, and the drying cord up on the shower, he falls, it wraps around his neck, and he lands in the tub, and his feet are all wet and shit from the water. So he's not able to get traction to stand up. And the blood vessels in his eyes pop. And his eyes are all red and shit. It's really gruesome. He has a little pair of like nose trimmers that are sitting on the toilet next to him. And he's going to try to get to them to clip the wire. But I'm going to be honest, I don't think those things are strong enough to cut through. I think it was useless, whatever he was doing. But he thrashes around for a while until eventually he dies. He gets strangled to death. And then, for the one and only time in this movie, and probably the only time in the series, death covers up its tracks by retracting all of the water to make it look like Todd killed himself and it wasn't an accident. Alex, of course, shows up right as they're bringing the body out in a body bag, and just in time for Agent Shrek and Ween to pull up and be like, "Oh, this kid's here at another death." Todd's dad comes over to Alex and tells him that you're the reason that my son killed himself because he couldn't stand the guilt of him being alive and not his brother. And once again, I was like, I don't see how this is Alex's fault. Like, the other brother should have not been a fucking stupid dude and got off the plane too. Like, so he's like, fuck you. And Alex is like, Todd wouldn't kill himself. But, you know, they're like, you don't know. And then for some reason, Clear is here and she's hanging out behind a tree. And she's like, Alex, leave. She just keeps telling him to leave. So then I couldn't help but think, do these agents think that Alex is like a master criminal who somehow got away with blowing up a major airline flight and now killed his friend and was able to like sneak out and walk up like he just showed up? Like, what kind of dude do they think Alex is? So Alex leaves. The next day, he goes to visit Clear to ask her why she was at Todd's house last night. And she says that she knows that Alex still feels some type of pull, some type of dark energy that's followed them since that day. And she can feel it too. And that's why she was at Todd's house, because it pulled her to Todd's house. Alex then says that maybe there's something after all of us. Maybe something hasn't left us since that day. And he just wishes he could talk to Todd one more time because maybe Todd would know the answer. And then Clear is like, well, let's go see him. And then they break into a memorial home where in the autopsy room, Todd is just out on the table with like the needles or rods sticking in him that's pumping like the embalming fluid into him. And I was like, what is your plan here, Clear? Like, I thought for a second she was going to conjure up Todd's spirit and have him talk to them. Like, I didn't know where this was going. But no, in reality, it was just a dead body that they were going to look at. And they would have gotten no answers if not for the fact that Tony Todd was the Undertaker here, I guess is what he would be called. And he shows up and he's like, hey, I'm Tony Todd. And they're like, hey, Tony, do you know why he has these marks on his neck? And he's like, oh, that's from pulling at the cord. And they're like, oh, so if he was pulling at the cord, he didn't mean to kill himself. And Tony Todd is like, death is never ending. It's just like sex and who you love and what cars you drive, and goes on like a 2-minute speech. And I couldn't help but be like, all right, Tony Todd, no one asked for this. Like, you just started rambling on about shit. But in this speech, Tony Todd gives them the thing about how death is a design, and there's a speak, Thomas. And there's a design for everybody. And it's all part of a grand plan. And Alex is like, well, what if I mess up that design? And we make our own design. And Tony Todd is like, you already did that. Now you got to figure out how it's going to come back for you and when it's going to come back for you. And then he goes, but be careful, because you don't want to mess with the Grim Reaper. You don't want to mess with that mad cat or whatever. Or Fat Daddy is how he described him. Yeah. He goes, you don't want to fuck with that Fat Daddy. And I was like, all right. And then he just pulls out the embalming fluid rod. So like a little bit seeps out of a hole in Todd's body. And then he starts laughing. And the other two are like, you know. And I was like, I think this would mess Alex up more than the movie is painting. Like, he sees his best friend dead on a table with rods stuck in him. Like, I feel like that would scar you a little bit, but it didn't seem to bother him. He was like, well, he's dead. It's not really him. So, anyway. And there you go. That's it. That's the end of that. That's the end of Tony Todd's part in this movie. But he did get, I believe, third billing on the Blu-ray cover. So there's that. After this, they go to a little like coffee house, and they're outside, and they decide that death must still be coming for all of them because it's still their time, because it was supposed to be their time on the plane, but they cheated death, and so now he's coming back. And they decide that if they can disrupt the pattern again, it'll free them from the design that death has made for them. As they're sitting out here, though, Carter and his girlfriend are driving by in his car, and Carter sees them sitting out there, and he tries to, like, just drive by, but then his fucking bully, like, mentality, or I guess he's fucked up because he feels like he's not in control of his own life anymore right now. So he drives up the road and does a U-turn in the middle of the street, which causes a car to swerve, and Sean William Scott, who was just riding his bike, to, like, fall over onto the ground and be like, ah! And he comes speeding back over to Alex and Clear, and he's like, oh, look at what we got going on here. And then all of a sudden, the teacher randomly shows up, too. So they have an entire reunion of everyone who's left alive from the plane crash. Carter's girlfriend gets pissed that Carter is going through all of this shit because he can't let go what happened that night with the plane. She's like, I'm not going to live my life focused on a plane crash that I didn't die in. I'm moving on from this. Fuck all of this. And she's like, if you can't move on from this, then you drop dead, Carter. Drop dead. And then she steps into the street, and a fucking bus just smacks the shit out of her and kills her. And Carter's girlfriend is dead. And then it cuts, and there's a solid 30 seconds of Alex just dropping an antacid into, like, his drink on the couch. And I'm pretty sure that I read that that's in the movie simply because on test screenings, it took that long for the audience to calm down because it was such an unexpected... Like, nowadays, the bus trope is it was played out. It's played out nowadays. Like, oh, they got hit by a bus. It is... What? It is weird to see it in a non-comedic sense, because that bus trope became like a, scary movies used to use it all the time, where someone would get hit by a bus or a car in the middle of the street. But this was like just a straight up shock, like, oh, hit by a bus, you're dead. Also, I left this out, but Alex, as they were sitting there, they were mentioning how, like, death leaves little hints about what's next or whatever. And it started with the fan blowing the Todd thing, and then death just gives up at one point and starts telling them how people die, because Alex looks in the window and he sees the reflection of a bus, like, go by, and then all of a sudden she gets hit by a bus. And it happens later with another character where death does the same thing. He just shows him in the window how he's about to die. So later that day, Alex is at home all depressed and shit. He's not taking any phone calls after he watched that lady get hit by a bus. He's watching the news, and the news figured out how the plane blew up, and it was like an electrical misfire that went into, like, a fuel pump under the plane and spread and eventually combusted. And they show, like, they track where it started and the line that it took and where it ended. And so Alex is able to stop the TV and look and see who would die first. And that's how he's able to figure out the order in which people are going to die. So Miss Lutton, the teacher, is the next one to die. So we go over to her, and we see that she's packing up her house, and she's getting ready to move out of town. She's talking about everything reminds her of that day. She's still dealing with survivor's guilt about letting that other teacher get on the plane. So she just wants to get away from this place, get the fuck out of there. Fucking Alex then just shows up at her house and starts, like, sneaking and peering around. And she sees him because he's just outside. So she calls the cops on him. She's like, hey, this guy's out here just fucking lurking around. So Agent Ween and Shrek show up just in time to see Alex like peeking around under Miss Lutton's car. And they're like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And he's like, I'm checking the tire pressure." And they're like, "Get the fuck in the car," you know? So they take him away. And then we go back inside with Miss Lutton. And she goes in the closet and she pulls out a vinyl record. And she's like, Mama's favorite. And she puts it on. And it's John Denver. And Rocky Mountain High starts playing. This bitch then goes over and is like washing a tea kettle, and as she was washing it, I was like, that looks really weird. Like, it doesn't look like she's really touching it. And then all of a sudden we see that dark shadow in the tea kettle, and I guess that's why it looks so weird, because it wasn't real and they were getting ready to do that effect. But she sees it and she looks around and nothing's there, and she's like, oh, weird, whatever. So she's all stressed out. So she decides to pour herself a nice drink consisting of a coffee mug, 3 ice cubes, and vodka straight out of the freezer, and just plain vodka. The mug that she uses then gives the biggest fucking crack you've ever seen in a mug, and somehow she doesn't notice it just leaking profusely out, like vodka trailing through the house. Eventually, she moves the cup over a computer that she has, and so vodka drips onto the computer, and she puts it down on the ground. The vodka drips into the computer, hits like the fucking circuit board and shit, and starts sparking up, and the computer starts smoking. So she goes over to it and she's looking at it, and then the computer explodes and a glass shard from the screen lodges into her neck, and so she's bleeding out. Then the explosion sparks the trail of vodka that was left on the floor, which is kind of bullshit, because I think, isn't it like it has to be 100% pure alcohol or whatever to do that, and that's not how that works. But whatever, it trails all the way to the kitchen counter, where it eventually hits the entire bottle of vodka that she left out and explodes and causes a bigger fire in the kitchen. She falls down. She's bleeding out. She goes to grab a towel that is there. I assume to try to like clog up the hole. I don't really know why she wanted this towel. But either way, the towel is on top of a knife block. So when she pulls it, the knife block comes down with it, and a kitchen knife lodges itself into her chest. This is when Alex decides to show up. Alex had been in the interrogation room with them cops, and he's telling them the whole thing about how Death has a plan for everyone, and he's trying to save people, and they don't have anything to keep him, so they let him go. There is a line where Officer Shrek is like, "For a minute there, I really believed him. Gave me the creeps." So he shows up just in time to walk in and see her dying and this fire going on around her. And he goes to help her, but then the oven explodes and it hits the kitchen chair that's sitting there. So it falls over and lodges the knife further into her chest, which kills her. And then Alex goes, and just pulls out the knife. And so now he has the murder weapon, and he looks at it and he's like, oh shit, and he drops it. He runs out the back door just in time for Sean William Scott, who's riding by on his bike, to see him coming out, and for the house to blow up, and for now Sean William Scott to be convinced that he murdered their teacher. There's also enough. I think Sean William Scott might go to the cops at this point, or maybe it's just because the prints are on the knife. But after this, the cops are convinced that Alex killed the teacher, and they're on the hunt for him. They're looking for him. They're going around asking people if they've seen him. They go to Clear, and they're like, if you come in contact with him, you need to tell us. We think he's dangerous and shit. And she's like, yeah, sure, whatever, So that night, Clear calls Sean William Scott and Carter to meet at the Raven statue outside of the school. Carter is trying to like carve his girlfriend's name into the plaque. He's like, she belongs up here, She tells them that they need to find Alex because Alex is in trouble. and he's the only one who knows how to fix what's going on. Um, so they meet up with Alex, who is just like a beach bum now. He's just chilling out on a beach randomly. Clear sits down to talk to him, and we learn here that her parents weren't shitheads. They just died when she was a kid. Her dad was murdered by a guy trying to rob a convenience store. And I believe the mom died in a car crash, I think. And she's like, so if that was my grand design, if that was Death's grand design, then fuck Death, you know? So they load Alex up into Carter's car, and they're like, we're going to take you to my parents' cabin out in this woods so you can hide out there. On their way there, though, Alex is sort of explaining the Death design thing and how there's a pattern, and he basically lets it slip that Carter is the next one to die. And so Carter is like, well, fuck that. I'm going out on my own terms. And so he just decides to floor the car, and he's just driving. He's driving through stop signs and stop lights. He's being super reckless. As they're driving through all this stuff, Sean William Scott goes, I fucking hated French class. And I thought that was very funny. As they're speeding along, Alex looks out the window, and once again, he just sees a train coming at them. And so it's like, all right, well, a train's going to be the way that everyone dies next, you know? So it just so happens that Carter stops them on a train track, and he sits there, and he's waiting for a train. He doesn't have to wait very long either, by the way. He stops, and then there's just a train right there. Very convenient timing on this train. So Sean William Scott, Alex, and Clear all get out of the car. They're trying to tell Carter, you know, to get out, but he's just sitting there. You know, he's going to go out on his own terms. He doesn't care what they say. As the train is approaching, Carter decides he doesn't want to die yet. So he goes to say like this cool line where he goes, not my time. And then he like goes to turn on the car. It won't start. It's stalled out, you know. So he can't get the car to start. So eventually he tries to get out, but all the doors lock and he can't get the seatbelt open. So now he's freaking out. The train's getting closer. So Alex runs in to help him, and they fight for a little bit. And eventually he's able to get him free from the seatbelt just before the train hits the car, which I'm going to be honest, by the time he got him out of that seatbelt, in reality, I think they were both dead. I don't think there's any way they were getting out of there. So the car gets smashed. Everyone's laying there. They're all, you know, freaked out. Sean William Scott gets up and starts yelling at Carter, and he's like, see, you're next. I'm not hanging around. It's Death hanging around you, dude. Death's coming after you, you know? And as he's talking, we see this piece of metal from the car that's lodged under the train, and it's shaking around. And as Stifler is yelling, you're dead, you're dead, the piece of metal shoots out, and it cuts Sean William Scott's head in half. It's a very cool half decapitation, which is bonus points if you do a half decap. It's really cool. And so Sean William Scott is dead. So Alex then realizes after that Death must, if it skipped you, because that was supposed to be Carter's death, and then they saved him, so it goes to the next person. And so Stifler was the next person. So then they look, and Alex is the next one to die. So they take him to Clear's cabin, and they drop him off there. And once again, we do another time jump. I'm not sure how long, but it's enough for Alex to be, if you remember the YOLO song that Lonely Island did when YOLO was a big term, and the whole song is about like stay inside because you only live once, you don't want to die, you know. He's living that life. Has duct tape everywhere. He's like fanning out his walk path. He's putting on gloves to eat like peaches and shit. And then randomly, he's eating cat food. And I don't know what the cat food is. Cat food safer to eat than people food? Is it an Always Sunny thing where you have to eat all the cat food because there's a bunch of cats outside that like to fuck all night? So you have to be asleep before them? I don't know, but he's eating cat food. And then I think Death tries to kill him. I'm not sure. Like, a door slams shut and a little knife, like, sticks through it. And then he opens it up and there's a hook on the ground and he picks it up and it's a rusty hook. And he goes, tetanus. Clever. You fuck. And he starts cussing Death. And he's like, you're not going to get me. I'm going to survive this shit, you know? So the cops are going around and they're asking Clear, you know, they're like, listen, if you tell us where Alex is, we can put him in, safekeeping and he'll be safe with us and all this shit. And so I think she decides to tell them where Alex is at because we go back over to Alex and he's reading the newspaper. And in the newspaper, it's talking about the two sisters that died on the plane that wanted to switch seats with him. And he realizes that he never switched seats with them in this timeline. So, in reality, it's not his turn to die. It's Clear's turn to die. So he goes to save her. And as he's going outside, a bunch of cops roll up to arrest him. And so I think she told them where he was at. It's okay, though, because he just gets in a canoe and slowly rolls away, and they can't stop him. Also, Clear is a very stupid name, and there's definitely a scene here where when Alex realizes she's the next one to die, he goes, Claire is gonna die. And it's like, yeah, they should have just called her Claire. I don't know who came up with Clear, but it's stupid. So, he rows away. We go back over to Clear's house, and a fucking power line. There's a storm outside. It goes down, and this power line becomes an electric snake that is biting at everything outside. She also has this dog that I don't think we've been introduced to at this point in the movie, but it's outside, and it keeps, like, the electrical wire keeps getting near the dog. So she goes outside to get the dog away from the electrical wire. When she does this, the wind kicks up and sends like this giant umbrella through the air and it lands right next to her. And it's like, oh, that could have stabbed me. She then picks up the umbrella. Why did she even do this? She stabs it into the pool, like the swimming pool. I don't remember why she did that. Or does it just go up itself and kick in? I feel like she stabbed it, but I don't remember. Anyway, somehow the umbrella ends up stabbing into her above ground pool that she has. So she grabs the dog and unties the dog, and they, trying to get her away from there. Alex, meanwhile, has shown up. He's rode all the way to where her house is. He's running through the woods to try to get to her house. He eats shit down the hill at one point and stops with his face like an inch away from a stick that would have just gone right through him. We go back over to Clear, and the pool collapses and water spreads out all over the yard. So now the entire yard is electrified. She climbs up onto the side of the house. And she's trying to get into her window. In the water, we see that dark shadow of Death once again. Back over Alex, a whole fucking tree falls on top of him. And he's in like a tiny body of water. So he's drowning. And he's like trying to fight. And it looks stupid because it doesn't look like it's holding him down at all. But he manages to get up eventually. He's like, So Clear manages to climb back into her house. And then the electrical wire hits the side of her house and I guess causes all of the electrical equipment in her house to blow up simultaneously. It starts everywhere she runs. It's just like just blowing up everywhere. So she goes into the garage and she gets in her car and she's going to drive out of there. Meanwhile, the electrical wire is legit just going Evil Dead at this point and somehow has followed her all the way to the garage and is attacking the garage door. She's trying to open the garage, but since all the electrical shit is out, the garage door opener doesn't work. So she just decides to drive through it. She backs up through it, and the metal rod attached to the garage opener swings down and stabs into her car, and keeps her stuck in place, A gas can then falls over and starts pouring gas all over the place, because you gotta have that. Alex then shows up and he's like, hey, Clear, hang on. I'm going to try to help you out. He then starts to fight the electrical wire with a shovel that he found. The electrical wire wins and it sends the shovel like flying into the garage. And it somehow hits a fucking CO2 tank or a gas tank. I don't know, but it hits and it flies like a torpedo and causes like sparks on the ground that sparks up the gasoline that was on the ground that poured from the tank. Alex then decides that, Clear's gonna die. So he's like, listen, I'm gonna grab the wire and you'll be safe and it'll end the cycle, I guess, So he goes over and he grabs the thing and it gives her just enough time to get out of the car, and then the car explodes and sends Alex flying back into the garage. Just in time for all the cops to show up and shit. And they come over and they're trying to save him. And Clear comes over and she's holding him. And I get there was obviously feelings involved, for Clear and Alex in this movie. But besides her kissing him on the cheek, they never once like kissed or even acknowledged that there was anything between them. But she's going over to him and she's like, baby, get up, And he's lying there and he's dying. And then everything goes white. And we come back up and it's 6 months later. And Carter and Clear, who is blonde now, she's dyed her hair, are boarding the plane. And then all of a sudden, wouldn't you know it, Alex is here as well and he's alive. They're all talking about they can't believe they're finally going to France, after all this. And Alex is like, I can't believe we're getting on another plane. And I was like, yeah, you're telling me. This doesn't seem safe at all. But, whatever. They go to a bar. They have a toast for all their dead friends. They're having a good time. But then Alex is like, but there's something I can't understand. And he pulls out like the whole diagram of everyone who was supposed to die and shit. And he's like, I don't understand why it would skip you and go to Stifler and then go to Clear. But if it skipped her, then wouldn't I be next? But it hasn't done, And Carter's like, well, maybe you are next. Maybe it's still waiting to come around, And as he says that, a street musician behind them starts playing Rocky Mountain High by John Denver. And Alex hears it, and he's like, oh, fuck. And the wind starts picking up and shit. And there's stuff like rolling around and breaking. And Alex is like, listen, I'm going back to the hotel room. I'll talk to you guys later. And they're like, what? Are you sure? And he's like, yeah. So he's leaving, and this time Clear is the one that sees a vision. She looks and she sees like a bus in the window. And so she yells out to Alex and stops him from walking in the street right before a bus goes by. The bus swerves away from him and causes an accident until eventually the bus slams into the side of a building that causes a rod to collapse and a giant sign to come swinging down. And it's about to crush Alex, but Carter tackles him and gets him out of the way. And then Carter stands up and he goes, see, I told you were next. And then Alex goes, but it skipped me. And then Carter goes, well, then who's next? And then you see the sign swinging down below him. And right before it hits Carter, it cuts to credits. And that is Final Destination from the year 2000. Luckily, after that, they all lived happily ever after. And they totally just don't kill Alex off screen in the second one. In the second one, I'm pretty sure that we just see a newspaper clipping talking about how Alex dies in like a car crash or something like that. I know Clear is in the second one, but I'm pretty sure Alex is just fucking dead. That is also not the original ending. There's a bunch of different endings in this movie, I believe. One is Alex dies, but then Clear is somehow pregnant with his kid. Once again, in this version of the movie, you never see anything like them banging happen. And it's supposed to be, they stop death with a new life and shit, which is something that they'll explore in later movies about how if we create a new life in the cycle, it'll stop death or whatever. Um, but yeah, there's that ending, and then I think there's another ending that I can't remember, but I think test audience liked this ending the best. And I'm gonna be honest, it's an iconic scene of the sign swinging down behind Carter about to kill him. So I think out of the endings, I think that the one that they went with is probably my favorite ending out of them. This movie had a budget of $23 million, and it made a box office of $112 million. These things made some fucking money. Let me tell you. There's a reason there's 5 of them? 6 of them? I don't know. I own them all. That's how I got the Blu-ray that has 4. Yeah, and then there's the 5th one. So I think there's only 5. I think they're in the process of making a new one as we speak, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But I'm pretty sure, yeah. And so, I mean, these just start getting pumped out, like, from, for years. They're getting pumped out. And like I said, it starts getting more and more complicated, how people die. And that's really why people started going to watch them, is because they just want to see people die. Eventually, I think they do get very mean-spirited, where, like, all the characters are just assholes because you all know they're going to die. So you just want to see them die. But this movie, you legitimately, like, besides maybe Carter, just because he's being a prick, you don't want anyone to die in this movie, So it's nice to actually care about a character, which I think is something they lose later on. But, like I said, one day I'm sure we'll get around to watching, the other ones. Let's do best of, worst of. My best of is going to be Todd's death. It's very simple and it's gruesome. It's fucking, I mean, the blood vessels popping in the eyes. It's such a simple death compared to other shit that happens in this movie. And especially later on. But it's so well done. Like, you don't need to go over the top for shit all the time. Like, that's such a scary thing if you put yourself in that position of being, strangled to death. And just not being able to get your footing. And it sucks and it's scary. And it's a really effective death. So that's my best of. Worst of, I guess I'm going to say when death covers up its tracks. That's a very weird thing to happen. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to go. I think that's the only time it ever happens. And I kind of, even though I'm putting it as the worst of, because it is kind of stupid, I'm almost interested to see if that happened throughout the other deaths and movies. If Death, like, had to cover up his tracks everywhere he went. But they only do it the one time. So, so that's going to be my worst of for, for Final Destination. But that is it. Boy, really is. It's a really good movie. If you have not watched Final Destination, go and watch it. It's a classic. I feel like it's one you need to watch. It's prime Devon Sawa. Idle Hands had come out the year before. When was SLC Punk? SLC Punk, I think, was around the same time. Fucking Casper comes out around this time. Yeah, it's the Stan music video, I think, comes out like the year after this. This was prime Devon Sawa time, and yeah, it's really good. The performances are really good. Yeah, go check it out if you haven't watched it before. I highly recommend it. But that is about it for Final Destination. Next week, I don't know what we're watching. Next week work should be all good, so it should be back to Friday. Once again, I don't think anyone really cares that much, but I wanted to see how long I could go without missing a Friday, and we made it 3 years. That's pretty good if I do pat myself on the back a little bit. The 3 years, every Friday, there has been an episode. With it, I mean, I had computer problems for like 8 months straight. You know, I had foot surgery in the middle of it, so I'm very proud of the 3 years that we didn't miss an episode. I'm still, even though it's just me most of the time, I'm still very proud of the 3 years of the podcast that we've made. I could be talking into a void. I don't care. I just like talking about horror movies. Um, so if anyone listens to them and likes them, that's all. That just makes it better. Um, so I don't. Every year we've done a year one, year two. I don't think we're gonna do a year three. So just if you stuck around for this, this part, thanks for whenever you came in. Thanks for being here through the third year of the channel. Um, yeah, and here's to year four, which is probably going to be some changes. Yeah, I think I might want to start doing some watch, not watch alongs, but I've been watching a lot of Red Letter Media, and I'm gonna be honest, I've just thought about stealing their fucking bit. Well, not their bit, but you know how they'll talk about a movie, but they've also watched the movie and they have a recording of them watching the movie and they play that. I've been thinking about doing that, so maybe that'll be something I do in the future where I actually have recording of me watching the movie. So when I talk about how at one moment I went, "Holy shit," I could actually just show you that moment. Um, but that's all. That's all for later. Also, another recommendation. If you like the Foo Fighters, they just came out with a new album. It is fucking great. I was surprised at how good it is. It is by far the best album they've made since Wasting Light, which was like 10 years ago, and it might be their second best album they've ever made. It was so good. I was so shocked. So go listen to that if you like the Foo Fighters and you didn't know they had a new album out. Also, I know I talked about reading this fucking book. If this book exists, you're in the wrong universe. Turns out it's book 4 of a whole series, and I'm pissed. Because I was reading, I was like, man, these characters are really fleshed out. Like, it feels like there should be more. There's 3 more books I have to read now, and a movie that's a horror sci-fi movie. So we'll watch it, called John Dies at the End. It's got Paul Giamatti, Clancy Brown, is that his name? The guy who voices Mr. Krabs, and he's in a bunch of shit. So look out for John Dies at the End eventually when I'm probably going to read the book first. But yeah, so that's cool. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Final Destination. Next week, it'll be something. I promise. And I will see you guys then. Go check out the gaming channel. I don't know what's coming out. Me and Maverick are still playing Saints Row, the new one. So a video is not going to be out of that for a little bit, but probably pretty soon. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.